Hello. Today we have with us Jason Gutzmer, a colleague of mine here at the university, a master of many things, and one in particular is iconography and the still image. And that's what we're going to be covering today, kind of going all the way back to the beginning of man to modern times, and what these symbols that we see and use every day, how they got their beginnings. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Greg. So when we ask a room full of students often to talk about icons, the icons that people think of first in our culture today is stuff like this, and like on our iPhones or whatnot. Applications, software, things like that. Of course, icons show up in all different kinds of places, but this is a good example. But it, like you said, it goes back further, and even how we design these, I think, is influenced by how we've been making icons since the beginning. And the beginning, I mean the beginning. The images that we started making on the cave walls, they gave us a sense of our place. They identified us as cultures. We represented things that were important to our survival, our world vision, if you will.
Yeah.
This image is 36,000 years old or more. It's not just an image of a bison. It's not just an icon of a bison. It is a symbol. It's something that represented a lot more. It was the whole survival of a culture. So when we first started looking at icons, they were this idea of an elevated status. You didn't just get your picture painted on the wall for no reason. You know, it was when we decided to be artists, it was to elevate things. It was the place of the mundane and the sacred coming together, and that was the beginning of most of the art form. I think today we still have connections to that. We certainly still use the organization of space, color, all these things from that ancient hierarchy of beliefs.
Absolutely.
We started looking at the world vision, but then we also started looking at the cosmovision. What I mean by that is we look at our place in the whole cosmos, and so we started thinking about the structure of humanity and its place in the universe. And the sun obviously was one of the images that appears and still is emphasized in our design: radial symmetry, circles, color. We created structures like the pyramid. And the pyramidal structure is something that we still refer to in terms of like top-down leadership. The Egyptians were filled with symbols that were image-based, but they were world vision, cosmovision, and that was the beginning in that one culture, but it actually was almost universal. Simultaneously, this Mesopotamian image has that same sun disk, which is a god image. You have a moon and more sun disks, multiple points of stars, maybe representing different times or different concepts of the sun. But what was interesting is that they really were happening everywhere. You go across the water to the Aztec culture. This is filled with glyphs. Every one of these is a rabbit. You've got jaguars. You've got dogs, flint and knife, etc. I mean, just filled with icons. Every single icon seen by itself, but the icons around the central figure of the sun and movement. Olin was the character of movement, which represents time and wind and whatnot. So to these cultures, this is just filled with information that can be codified and simply understood. Of course, we have to interpret a lot more now.
Yeah.
But I think that that central figure face in the sun, ironically, just kept showing up over and over. The Son of God, the Son of the Sun, the four directions, the hand mudra, all of these things are seen all over the world. In India, the same figure, basically. Yeah. In Krishna.
Completely different cultures, but
Absolutely.
Still speaking the same
visual language. Yeah. And of course the mudras have very similar meanings throughout, but they have, it's a whole language that's carried by that culture too. And like the horses, and I mean every little bit of these images even the color combinations.
Sure.
So as you start to see these symbols and appear more in what I call graphic design now, like this icon is basically a symbol language. That's what iconography is. So you see the disk with the sun, you see the stars around that. The Christ figure has circles within circles. And then even in the textural elements, the design elements that aren't as important, they keep reinforcing.
Absolutely. It's that sun disk element again and again and again everywhere throughout this piece.
Right, and different interpretations of it, but they're embellishing and reinforcing, and beautifully combined too. The idea of the directions all coming together there. So this modern contemporary frame of the Matrix really is loaded with all of these symbol systems, all of these icons, and they're used in a contemporary way, but they're still pulling from this ancient memory kind of concept. Look at the composition of the placement of the head. There's just enough of that circle there that we have the halo. We have the illumination of the sun, or the illuminated one. He was the one, right?
The one.
I would even argue that these are sort of like the cosmos, the stars. As that image stops, you have the mudra of the hand. There's a lot of stuff happening here.
It really is impressive when you take a scene like this and look at the intentional placement of the set design and the artwork behind the actor, and that the holding of the hand. It's really great to see that kind of thought is going on even in intense moments of action films.
Right. Yeah. This is an action scene where bullets are flying.
Right.
And this is laden with iconography. And what's really interesting is that a really good cinematographer is intuitively designing this way. They might not be thinking totally formally. They might not be saying, "Oh, let's create a Jesus moment or a Krishna moment or something," but they are pulling from icon understanding in terms of symmetry, whether it's radial symmetry or asymmetry, and the idea that this creates action in the diagonals, horizon lines, all of these things, they are intuitively understood in us. I mean, they go back to our blood memory. A horizon line is a calming thing until a lion shows up to eat you. That's the vertical. Or the diagonal when it's leaping at you, right? So these are things we're hardwired. Our brain is literally hardwired to be understanders of media, and as artists, we make that media, we make those icons, we use those designs intuitively often because there's a part of our brain that understands that. Colors are the same way.
Right.
So we also started looking at ourselves and humanity as sort of the center of our own universes, right? And so when we wanted to talk about things beyond ourselves or the cosmos, we anthropomorphized figures. So this is a ceremonial vessel from Colombia, probably talking about an underworld element. You have a bat type figure, these fangs and whatnot. The bat is the cave, the subconscious. It's a vessel of water, which is also a metaphor or symbol, icon for that. But you notice that we made it very human. And we do that because that's the first thing we want to see. When we look to an image, you can have a big poster that says in red letters, "Look here first." But if there's a figure there and smiling at you or looking, or if its gaze is visible, we see that figure first.
We go there first.
Before we go to the linguistic part. That anthropocentric, self-centered, self-human identifying part of us is hardwired into us. And actually we can design things with icons to have somebody look somewhere, one place, then another, and another, with that hierarchy that we're hardwired for. And what's interesting is we started layering up, as artists, we started understanding that we could put more and more symbols in, like the Virgin Mother character. But this is a Moche culture, and they also have amazing line art that shows up on their ceramics and murals and whatnot. And this is north of Peru. This is a headdress piece, a big gold piece. This is the sun, again, but this is a sea god. So this is the illuminated sea god with the waves of water, the tentacles of an octopus, the face of a jaguar-esque, human, blue-eyed water symbol, claws of some other ferocious animal. So it's like a world-bridging kind of character that is layered with symbols, but it's totally understood by the culture that is interpreting it.
Yeah.
And so each culture went on to do that. Now we also started looking at how art was a great way to use one culture and bring in another. The Catholic Church shows up in the New World, where we have the Aztec pantheon, you have the water god Tlaloc, and you have Quetzalcoatl, and you have Olin, and you have all these characters that represent things. And Tonantzin was the Mother Earth goddess. There was a temple there. Well, the apparition of the Virgin of Guadalupe, this is the symbol of Mexico. More so even than the flag of Mexico with the eagle and the cactus. Well, why? Because the people of Mexico were they were the first agricultural culture in the Americas. They created corn as a domestic thing. Their connection to earth was totally the most important thing possible. Yeah. So when the Virgin of Guadalupe shows up, where does she show up? She shows up at the hill where the temple of Tonantzin was, the Earth Mother Goddess. Well, she's embodied in these artistic renditions, this icon, in a cloak of vines and flowers and foliage. And then if you look beyond that,
she's wrapped in stars,
right.
The universe,
right. So you have
surrounded by the sun.
Exactly. So all of that connection to the cosmovision of the people of the Mexican culture was wrapped into this new apparition. With the sun, even the moon shows up there, right? You got the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth. That connected to people's iconography, and then they put a figure in there.
Yeah.
She now is embodied by a human figure. They didn't represent their figures in that humanistic way, but we are hardwired to see ourselves. We look there first and we see ourselves in this holy image. So interesting layering of concepts, layering of design, and layering of psychology, really, a way of motivating people to open up to a new sense of order. Order and hierarchy, we talked about the pyramid. Well, in the Andean cultures, you have that same concept of the world we live in, the world above, the world below, the condor, the jaguar, and the serpent. And they understand that in several ways, though. It's not just this layered way, but it's also 4 directions, 7 directions. And so, interestingly, the snake, the puma, and the condor, or the snake, the jaguar, and the condor is represented in the Chacana, but this shows up from above in temple spaces. It shows up in adornments, but this symbol also is the 4 directions. It's the sun. It's the 7 directions. So the 7 directions, you got north, south, east, west, above, below, and center. And the idea that that kind of symbolism can be pulled out of a symbol that's so simple, and you will see it all over the place, is really interesting. It's also a stop sign.
Yeah, right.
So it's an octagon, and so it's that layering still shows up. We took those visual things from our world to survive. The bison, agriculture comes on, the wheat sprig, the water god. These things that are elemental to our survival, our cosmovision starts showing up. We invent writing, cuneiform, but it also had to have an economic, and it became a way to transmit information of taxes and collection and lists. So this thing has everything from dogs to sprigs of grain. So we start to explain our mundane world with these icons. We've elevated them with the art, but they can now transmit this information far and wide, right? Yeah. With these tablets. And basically that becomes written language. Icon becomes symbol, that then now we put symbols together to make words. But really, it all started with picture, images, icons. The symmetry of an A is still a powerful design element.
Yeah.
And the idea that it has a hierarchy.
It's the pyramid.
Right. It's the first letter of the alphabet. It's the pyramid. It's all of these things. And whether it shows up in one form or another, all of these languages that were developed around the world are icon-based in the beginning. So we keep doing it. And of course, religions were one of the ways that cultures organized themselves. And so the icons of those religions, when you simplify down, you pare down, they became very powerful symbols. Whether or not they were very organic, like the Sanskrit Om, or something totally symmetrical, they still had power of design and recognition, symbol systems. This image is, well, it's everywhere. You know, it's on coins, it's on dollar bills, it's the seal, and versions of it, state seals, and you name it, the FBI. You know, everybody's got some version of it, but it's layered as well. Like the version of Guadalupe, this has all the same things. You've got the stars, the 13 stars of the first colonies, illuminated. The illuminated first colonies, the beginning, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of the on high. The eagle, like the condor, right? The upper world, the vision, maybe the holier than, or the perspective from foresight and looking forward.
Yeah.
That was the vision that they had. And then you even have these clutching talons with powerful icons. These are the 13 arrows of war. The 13 olives of diplomacy and peace. So the eagle is reaching out with diplomacy and peace, but it's got its back covered with the war arrows,
power,
right?
Yeah.
It's also shielded by that 13 stripes again. So you see this symbol show up over and over. This is not unique. It shows up in Austria, it shows up in several Central American countries have a symbol almost identical. They were contemporaries, but they use the symbols in the same way. Coat of arms symbols are often using this, whether it's a griffin or, you know, so these mythic characters also embody different elements, the force of a lion, the vision of an eagle. So icons can be layered, very layered, or they can be very simple. We get to a more contemporary, it's probably the most contemporary image we're going to look at, in terms of something that can become an icon. This is from a simplified image, from a photograph, the most famous photograph of all time. It was an Italian photographer, did a whole photo shoot with Che Guevara in Cuba after the revolution. But then this image became so recognized, and that slogan or saying that went along with Che's way of thinking of hasta la victoria siempre, until victory forever, meaning that he would fight forever until all people were free or something. That symbol became this very simplified thing. So now this image has been co-opted and turned into other icons. You get
Which is
all
interesting,
kinds of pop culture stuff.
because it's being used to keep telling his story for other people and different purposes, right?
And it's interesting because you can take, this image is seen in Asia, it's seen in Africa, it's seen in, it's not just on the little island in the Caribbean.
Right.
It went beyond because of the culture that it came out of. It became the symbol of the culture of revolution. So the concept of revolution, of course, is a very universal thing. If there's a structure above you and you're on the base and you have to rise up against it, this became the symbol. And so popular cultures now, of course, transcend borders. We're not just in Mexico or Mesopotamia. Now we have things that we share and carry across the world. Music. This image is interesting because this is a vector graphic, super simplified, stylized things, once again from a photograph. But ironically, a bunch of 18-year-olds can still probably reference where this came from.
Or at least who they are.
Or at least who they are. They might not know it's Abbey Road, but they will probably say the Beatles. And it's interesting because it uses simple graphic styles. We recognize that this is a crosswalk because of the zebra stripes. Very simple. That's like the stop sign, right? We have icons that are branded in our minds, and these four characters in their simplistic state become that symbol of something that transcended the Isle of Great Britain and went all over the world. So modern iconography is this idea where you take the culturally significant, our modern world vision or our modern cosmovision, and you elevate it by making it into art, and you make it sacred. You take the mundane, it becomes sacred when it becomes an icon. And so basically anything that's understood as important, we figure out ways to make them iconic, right? And that is the beginning of where all of our modern design stuff comes up, especially when we get to this very simplified version.
Yeah.
Now when we're looking at icons, what are the things that pull us in? That understanding that's culturally basically limited, you'd say, by the unique culture. Well, there's things that are not unique. Like we said, the sun thing showed up everywhere, right? But what happens when we look at some app icons? Let me just pull up the full index sheet here. Okay, so if you look at this from afar, you've got a stamp collection. You've got a whole pile of stuff. So if you close your eyes for a second and then open them, where do you land? Where'd you go? Okay, so this one is, we probably went there because of a central theme. It was the bullseye. It also has a color element.
It's got fire going on with its palette, you know.
Right.
I think that's what had my eye.
If it was here, we might, and replace this one, this might have done it because of the radial symmetry of that sun form.
Yeah.
So central themes will pull us in. We're still using that. Even though we're making apps for, this is a nutrition app, you know, like what you eat. It's on a popsicle stick.
Yeah.
It's ironic, but it's iconic. Uses that design element. Well, why does red stand out? It's hardwired.
It is hardwired.
Fruit was ripe. Fire was danger. You know, we had hardwired
Blood
things.
came from a kill.
Yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
right? Or harm.
Yeah, and so you have these, we know that, you know, red and black and white are going to be great because contrast is key. Comes from the stone carvings of having some relief. The charcoal made it work. It's easy to see. It's easy, you know, these are iconic tools, right? So now you get into the design elements that make icons work, some better than others. Well, the mudra hand, the offering of the apple, this is actually an app about colorizing photographs or working with images in that way. But it's this iconic app, it reaches out to you. Each one of these reaches out to you in a different way and pulls on different things. Now, they're looking for that simple symbol that can represent the whole world that is an application. And basically, any of our designs, that's what we want to do. We want to give the most amount of information in the most economic way, visually.
Yeah.
Without having to say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. If you put 1,000 words next to it, we want to just have all that understanding.
Right.
So you have different ways of handling the space. These are all the exact same compositional space, but you have an object that embodies that glyph space, that icon space. You have a symbol system that uses this rainbow and whatnot. Some of these are games, some of these are, you know, flight status. You've got, this is for a chemistry application to help you with problem solving. This is a math equation solver. All of them are still using icon like we have the historical icons in this new way. Now, of course, you've got games and whatnot. You've got photographic elements. You've got things that break the picture plane, so you use that sense of action and whatnot to pull us into the games.
Sure.
But it's still that same idea of taking the mundane and making it sacred or important by putting it into a frame of reference.
Right.
And that's what our spaces are. They're frames of reference, they're frames of meaning. And each one of these has narratives that you can come up with. If you ask people what this is about, they'll come up with meaning based on the symbol systems.
Yeah, they'll create their own story based on experiences in the past with the fedora,
Right,
or
associations.
the magnifying glass, right? Yeah.
So they're all, now you have new cultural frames of reference, and you have subcultures, and you have subcultures. And so all of these things are designed to work off of those understandings. And so it's an interesting art form now that we look at how do we simplify, how do we make the new icons. Well, we still borrow from that same placement, compositional emphasis of foreground, midground, background, all of those things that come into design, they came out of understanding of the universe.
Right.
The 7 directions, the 4 directions, the sun, the earth, all of these things. So
It's fantastic.
So as people start making their icons, I think people do it intuitively, like I said. If you're a filmmaker, if you're a graphic designer, whatnot, you are already pulling from your blood memory. It's coursing through you, you understand some of these things. But when you start to actually get literate and be able to talk about it and get intentional, saying, well, what would really work here is if, you know, I say look here first, but I make somebody have that connection because of the eye, and then I can get them to look here, there, and there. If we spend more time with a piece, we have more information that we can get into them, we can get more connection, more relationship. Even a big painting in a gallery, the average viewer spends only 3 to 5 seconds at the Guggenheim in front of an image. And I always joke that part of that is reading the title and the price tag if it's in the gallery.
Yeah, right.
So how do you get people to spend more time with your icon? Use the bold strokes that we've been doing for 40,000 years.
Yeah.
And we're hardwired to understand them, and then you can give us the little bit more information, the layers of understanding.
Subtext.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us today, Jason.
Great. Let's do it again sometime.
All right.
All right, thanks a lot.